Welcome to episode 62 of Paranormal Pendle, broadcasting to the Paranormal UK network at paukradio.com. So my very, very special guest on this episode is a returning guest. I've spoken to him twice before. Really pleased to have you on, Mr. Paul Sinclair. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Craig, and great to be back having a natter and just sharing a few items of interest. Let's hope we're sharing some of interest anyway with your listeners. So all good to go. Hit me with whatever you like.
Well,
from your
I'm sure that listeners will find you as fascinating as ever. And I'm really grateful for you coming on as well, because I know you're very busy at the minute. So thanks for coming on.
You're welcome.
I'd like to talk about Wolflands to begin with, because it's a project now that you've been doing for quite a while. I'm really interested to know how it all started, how it progressed, and where you're up to with it at the minute.
Right, no problem. Well, we're actually on with number 2 now. Working title is Wolflands 2, but it won't be that when it's finished. So over 3 years ago now, myself and Les, because he'd already been involved filming, little bits of footage. We'd been sort of out on little expeditions together and what have you, and I'd been receiving all these cryptid type reports. So I suppose where it began for me, well, when I wrote the first book, 2016, and no interest in the cryptid phenomena, if that's what we're going to call it, whether you subscribe to them being flesh and blood or whether you think that there's something paranormal to them. I had no interest in it. Not because I thought it were rubbish. It didn't appear on radar. Alien abductions, UFOs, a few ghostly things, that were me. And then when I wrote the book and the advert went in a few papers asking for stories and people's accounts, started getting stories from Flixton and East Yorkshire about what we would call the Flixton werewolf. Sort of piqued my interest. I discovered that there were a little bit to it, so I started getting more and more involved in that. And basically, Craig, people started giving me their accounts, and I thought, well, there's something to this. These people from all walks of life coming out with similar things, outrageous things that, nobody in the right mind should be trying to push the idea that something that fits the description of a werewolf or dogman or Bigfoot is real, surely to God. But they keep doing it, and I'm absolutely sold that these people are telling me the truth. They're seeing and experiencing something. So we started Wolflands, myself and Les, and interviewed lots and lots of people, from gamekeepers to academics, just gathering all this information with the experiences that they'd had. And I mean, it's just spiraled, Craig. There's just so much of it. And now I'm getting reports from not just East and North Yorkshire, but from all over UK and overseas. But I mean, primarily Wolflands centered around remote locations where people claim to have seen these things. And with the reports have come in now where people are experiencing these things in Suburbia. And almost akin to an alien visitation. I'm reluctant to say abduction, because not in all cases, but an alien visitation. I mean, there's one guy who's contacted us, and we've interviewed him, and we blanked his face out, and we've got him on the Truth Proof channel. And this guy, I don't know if he's going to feature in new film, but I'll just play with this one for a moment. I think he said he was about 8 or 9 years old, living in a busy town, I think on the outskirts of London, and his dad had bought him a push trolley with some bricks, the wooden blocks, as a gift. I think it was his birthday. And he stayed up in his bedroom and he's playing with these things longer than he should have been. And what happened was, before he realised it, because he's been brought up by his dad, and I think he's got some sisters as well in another room. Everybody's gone to bed. So he packed his things away. He's 8-year-old. He's not going to have packed his things away. So anyway, he leaves his toy, but goes into his dad's bedroom, gets in bed with his dad. The door's shut, and he's snuggled up to his dad, and then he just becomes aware that there's a light entered room from the hallway. And as he looks over the bed sheets, he said there's a thing that's just, he saw the door opening that just looked like a Bigfoot type creature just come in, shoulders, head and it. He said, and it just filled the doorway. He said, and this guy's a huge man in real life now. So I'm assuming his dad must have been a similar stature. He says, and he's tapping his dad to wake him up, and his dad wouldn't wake up. And he's watching this thing, and it's just looking at him through the door, and then it just retreats back. He said they had 2 German shepherds downstairs that never made a sound. I think he's probably 52 years old now. He's never had any other experiences of anything paranormal or any strange nature. Yet this has stayed with him from childhood. He's adamant it wasn't a dream. He saw it, he says, and it just retreated back, the door shut, and that what ended experience. So these things, it's almost like they've got the same ability. If people want to play with idea of alien abduction scenarios or alien visitation, that these things, they don't need to, the door opened. We know the door opened, but somehow it got into the property without opening any doors downstairs, with having some kind of nullifying effect on dogs. And so basically, where am I going with Wolflands? We're joining the dots, and we're collecting people's reports that are in Suburbia as well, and mixing it in with a bit of UFO stuff like we did last time, because there's a story that may get included from a place called Pinchenthorpe Forest, and a guy took his 2 young children camping, wild camping. And I know this guy Michael. I've spoke to him for years now, and that's why we first got in touch about this strange story. He said, and they're only little kids, but he's kind of a seasoned bushcrafter, is Michael. He's always out somewhere. And he said, well, I pitched my tent behind a dry stone wall just as a bit more protection, and we were on edge at forest. He says it were a wet, muddy type of day. He says, and we set tent up, and before we went into the tent during the evening, the kids took the shoes off, and I did. We took them inside because we didn't want to bring mud and leaves into tent. And they're in tent during night. It's not early hours at morning, but he says, but I was just at that point where I'm nodding off. He says, and I suddenly woke up with a start. Something wasn't right. Kids are fast asleep, so he's there. Kids are there. He said, and he saw a zip go down on tent, or he heard the zip going down. He said he had a knife in his pocket. He says, I immediately went for my knife. He says, and the craft knife. I don't mean some, So anyway, he immediately went for his knife. He says, and a hand come through the tent. He says, and it was skinny, fur-covered hand. He says, and then the head and shoulders, and this thing came into the tent with its half of its body. And it reached over towards his children. He says, and as it did, it looked at him, and so he was awake and touched him on the forehead. He says, I went straight out. I went out cold. He says, I'd gone. He says, the next thing I know, I'm being carried across fields. He's not going to say with his children, because he just knows he's being carried across fields. He comes to once again, and he's touched on the forehead and blanks out. Where it becomes interesting, because he could wake up and think, wow, this was a weird dream. Do you know what I mean? This was a strange one. When he wakes up in the morning, all the tent has got sludge inside it and leaves inside it on the base of the floor. And when the children wake up, the children say, both of them, Daddy, we got carried to a spaceship last night by a hairy Chewbacca. They're the children's words. Just real quirky stories that you think to yourself, just when you think you can't think of another scenario, we've got this. And Michael stuck to that story. I mean, I must have been speaking to the guy 7 years now, and it was before Wolflands that I knew about this one. So there's absolutely loads. The lady contacted me, probably 3 or 4 months since, and that's who I was messaging when you contacted me about 15 minutes ago, because she were off to the Whitby Goth Festival. Right. Yeah, I got it. We had my teeth, well, the real teeth, but we know that's what people say. So anyway, she says we'd just come down what's called to the Devil's Elbow on the North Yorkshire moors, going up towards Fylingdales. They'd been to the Goth Festival, I think that's correct. She says, and we're coming up the hill that now we're on North Yorkshire moors. So if your listeners, any of them aren't familiar with it, Google it. You'll see there's nothing there. You've got the the RAF base, the early warning base, there on your right-hand side as you're coming up that hill, but there's nothing else. Then you've got all these, you've got the moorland, and you've got these forests as well, and woodlands, a lot of where we filmed the first Wolflands, these areas. Says, and we're in a camper van. My husband's a complete skeptic with anything unexplained. So last thing we were looking for, anything unexplained. She says, and headlights are on. We're going up this hill. She said, and this thing crossed the road. She says, and it looked like sticks. It looked like branches. And I don't mean like a tree. She said, but she described its legs as looking like sticks. But if you pictured a praying mantis or a canine, she said, but it didn't look anything like a canine. It looked like sticks. She didn't get to see its head. She could see the arms and its legs as it crossed the road. She said, and there was like a white beam, but not a strong beam, or emitting from its chest, and it crossed the road in the beam of the camper van and went on over onto the moors. She says, and I thought, I daren't say out to my husband. I daren't say what I think I've just seen. She says, and we're driving, and he just went, did you, started with F, see that? And then they started discussing, and they both agreed what they'd seen. She went onto internet while she's talking to him. She says, when you get to our destination, can you draw what you've seen? So he did a little sketch, and then she showed him what she'd found on internet. Not something that's like common to that area, but she were looking for things like praying mantis insect and like hawks, because that's what she's drawn, and she'd done that. So basically, this lady's going to let us film her. Unfortunately, she's unlike a lot of the witnesses. Some of them have gone, their faces and talk to the camera. This lady wants to talk, but just from the back. She's probably embarrassed about what she's describing seeing, because if it don't fit in with narrative of what your upbringing suggests is real, or your circle of friends, it's a difficult one, in it, to even if you're true to yourself and you think, yeah, I've seen it, why should I lie? It's still difficult. You can avoid the ridicule. It's worth doing, Craig.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people can be very very cruel, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
So so it's interesting. So you mentioned before about something called the Flixton werewolf.
Yeah.
So is this a phenomena that's sort of linked in with this, or are these sound like slightly different phenomena to me from what you've described to me before?
Well, this Fylingdales one, I've never heard of it. Nobody's ever described anything like the one up at Fylingdales to me. I mean, I contacted RAF Fylingdales, and I didn't go into detail, but I gave them the date that this thing crossed the road, because I mean it's one of the most important military installations as an early warning station in United Kingdoms, and that place will be cameraed up and secure as tight as a drum. And a lot of land round there is owned by Fylingdales. Who's to say that this weren't some kind of military technology that were being tested? We can't rule that out. Not everything has to be paranormal. No. But I've contacted Fylingdales and told them. They've got back to me and said they've looked on their systems or their cameras, but they're not going to tell Paul Sinclair anything anyway, are they? No. But I just wanted to do that. I just wanted to cover that base. Yeah. But no, I've not heard anybody talk about anything of that description. But it's interesting that where she saw it, we've got a lot of burial mounds, a lot of standing stones, and I know that I've just deviated a little bit because you started on that question then about Flixton. We're not far away. We're not that far away, and we're still in North Yorkshire. And the Flixton werewolf stories, I mean, I think this is probably the oldest story of werewolfery, shall we say, in the world. Werewolfery. Oh. in the world. So, without a doubt, because you'll know Mark Ollie. Mm. Yeah, the archaeologist, years and years ago, qualified archaeologist. And I didn't realize when we interviewed Mark Ollie that it was Mark, back in the days when he worked at Flixton Star Car, who suggested that the early inhabitants of Flixton Star Car. First of all, I need to explain what Star Car is. Star Car is an ancient lake bed which would have gone for miles and miles in the Paleolithic period. So we're looking at least 8,000 to 12,000 years ago, and now it's dried up. It's just very fertile ground because it's sediment. I mean, they could grow crops or whatever, graze animals forever on it. They're never going to bottom it. But now there's just cattle on it and that kind of thing. But years and years ago, there's evidence that this is the first place where early man settled and wasn't a hunter-gatherer who travelled and was transient, moving around with the herds or chasing prey. They actually settled at Flixton. The earliest evidence of a house is at Flixton in the UK. Anywhere in the UK, the earliest evidence is at Flixton. But also they found evidence of deer antlers that had been shaped as masks, and not for hunting purposes. The archaeologists have suggested that these early people were shaman, practicing ritualistic magic and sacrifice. That found a lot of evidence of animal sacrifice, mass evidence of animal sacrifice, not just butchery to eat and sustain themselves, which takes me down the path of the shaman. And when we look at shamanism throughout the world, we talk about the suggestion that there's the possibility to transform into the beast. So if we've got archaeologists, not Paul Sinclair, suggesting that these early settlers at Flixton's Darkar were practicing shamanistic, ritualistic and shamanism, who's to say that the Flixton werewolf is not the remnants of those early days? Because I've got reports, obviously I can't go back anywhere near that, but I've got reports from the 1930s of farmers working on the Flixton Darkar. They call it the Cars. It's Carrs. The Cars simply means wetlands, reeds and elder. You already knew that. So, but some people might not. So basically, I've got reports from farmers. An old guy called Jimmy Keith claimed to have seen the Flixton werewolf at Ganton, which is on the Cars, because all these places link up and they're in close proximity. But back in 1037 AD, 1086 years ago, the then king, Athelstan, had a refuge built in Flixton. And he had it built to protect travellers from wolves.
Right.
But on top of that, the writings always say, and an infestation of savage beasts. No. Well, we didn't have any savage beasts apart from wolves. The bears would have been gone 1,500 to 2,000 years before. Now, I'm not saying that, oh, God, it's got to have been werewolves. But what I'm suggesting is that there's a strong possibility, because these things exist and they've been in this area, whether it's paranormal and some kind of ghostly echo from the past, ever since oral records, written records, and predating any living memory. Then we've got the village a few miles out of Flixton, 2 miles out of Flixton, called Hundmanby. And it's called that because it's Hund, as in hound, Manby, meaning farmstead of the hound man. So it's fascinating connotations to the wolf. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So it obviously goes back 1,000 years.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, if we go back to the time of Athelstan at 937 AD, these 1,086 years, I think, that he had the refuge built. We can't forget that wolves would have been prevalent. Wolves would have been absolutely apex predators. Yeah. And all of this could be like myth and legend. Well, if it is, why have I got people coming to me from all walks of life in 2024, because it's not stopped, telling me that they've seen things, pacing their cars, the huge wolf-type animals. We don't have natural grey wolves running around in UK. I think they talked about introducing them, didn't they? But
yeah, they did up in Scotland, I think. Yeah.
Well, there's another story. North Yorkshire Moors, close to Fylingdales, in between Fylingdales and in between Flixton, there's a pub called the Falcon on the moors on its own. And a guy contacted me who operates the dredger out of Whitby and Scarborough Harbour. Still be working there. He didn't mind me saying it, so I don't mind saying it. He goes to work on a motorbike. And I think I'm going back to about 2017, 2018. And he came to Bempton to speak to me and told me what he'd seen. He said, and I'm going to work one morning on my motorbike. He says, it's early morning, it's dark, or just getting light. He says, and you come down this hill on a bend. He says, and as I'm coming down the hill, he said, there's a car coming opposite way. And it's flashing its lights like mad at me. He says, and I'm thinking, wonder if there's been an accident or I don't know. He says, and when I got round the corner, he says, there's two huge grey wolves sat at the side of the road. Now, appreciate that there's no properties around here. It's remote. So in case somebody thinks, well, it could be somebody's Malamutes or Huskies that have escaped. He says they were huge. They were great big grey wolves. But where it becomes interesting for me, he says, because I couldn't believe what I'm looking at. He says, as I passed them, they smiled at me. That's where story got like sometimes they just fall on their ass, these stories. I'm sorry for saying it like that, but you think to yourself, you know, you've just told a great story. But for me, that those little details, because that guy's risking, if he is concocting a story, he's just spoilt it for himself.
Yeah.
But it seems so genuine. Yeah.
Yeah, by saying something that's completely off the wall.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, I mean, saying that he's seen two grey wolves sat on the side of the road is, you know,
yeah, that might be, yeah.
Enough, you know. But
then they smiled at me. He said they smiled at him.
Yeah,
it's nuts. But once again, it's all coming out of these locations. We get the reports at Flixton, a lot of reports. There's a hill just on out. We'll use the word Flixton kind of loose and fast because there's a little village called Folkton at the side of it, and there's Staxton where RAF Staxton Wold is. And if you put the three together, they'd only form a decent-sized village. So they're all incorporated. And just outside of Folkton, there's a hill called Whitegate Hill. And I've got over a 3 or 4 year period, I've got about 6 reports from motorists saying that they've been driving in the night down Whitegate Hill, and this thing set off running at the side of my car on 2 legs. On 2 occasions, 2 sisters, 2 young women driving home. So this thing jumped into the road, and then in one leap it had gone again. There's a guy at other side at cars at Caton, Lee and his wife Amanda. This thing, they're just on the edge of the cars. Once again, for listeners who've just come to us, the cars are nothing to do with motor vehicles, wetlands. And they've driven over the cars and they've got to Caton, where their home is. One of my daughters lives in Caton anyway. He says, but we just turned, I can't think of the name. I think it might be Star Car Lane, but they just turned down this road, which is a populated road. There's bungalows that were built probably in 1950s and 60s, and it's right on edge of this wetland. At the other side, you've just got the little village of Flixton, Folkton and Staxton, and that's remote. He said, now, just in my peripheral, something caught my eye. He says, and not a lot of street lighting. He says, and I saw this thing come down the side of a bungalow, and it jumped. He says, and in one jump, it were on the pavement, and in another, it were in middle of the road, and then it had gone. And he described it as looking like a werewolf. In his words, what was it? Me and Chris Turner filmed him. You know, so obviously that story's not going to go in Wolflands because me and Chris Turner filmed Lee, and that story's included in bringing down the light. But there's just no end. There's just hundreds and hundreds of stories coming in.
Yeah, it's interesting that, because when you were talking about that, something pinged in my memory. When I interviewed Mick McLaren from Winter Hill, and he was talking about a very similar experience. Sorry, my voice is going tonight.
Okay.
A very similar experience with somebody driving over Winter Hill, and suddenly they looked out of the driver's window, and he said the driver said it was like a wolf's head next to the window. And he was driving and he was doing about 35 mile an hour, something like that. But he said whatever this thing was obviously running and keeping up with him.
That's interesting.
Sounds very similar to what people have been seeing up there.
Yeah. Well, a few years ago, to be honest with you, it sounds a carbon copy of a story that I spoke about a few years ago. There's just out of Flixton and these areas, there's a place called Foxholes, little village, and you've got fairly miles and miles of nothingness, woodland and moorland in between. And this guy Andrew he'd been to see his parents in Scarborough. He's passed away now, actually. His best friend put him in touch with us, the historian Alistair Lavers, who does some work for us in Wolflands. And he's driving home. He's driving towards Foxholes, and I think it's November. It's been raining. bit of broken cloud, bit of moonlight, and I'm not talking about full moon or anything. So let's forget about full moon and bullets, silver bullets, because this don't figure in any of this. So it's Jaguar car, and he's driving, and he just turns to his right, and there's a huge wolf's head looking at him. This is what he couldn't get his head round. He's doing about 45, 50 miles an hour. It's keeping up with his car. It's as high as the window. With Jags are pretty low down anyway, aren't they? But unless you're in 4x4. He said, but it's filling the window. He says, and I can see its canine teeth hung down like thumbs, as big as my thumbs. And I said, what did you think it was then, Andrew? And he really well-spoken guy, this fella. And he went, it's a bloody werewolf. What? And he absolutely frightened him to death. He says, and he put his foot down and left this thing, and he could see it in his mirror, stood on the road. But it never got on two legs. He could see it stood on the road. But yeah, I suppose there's going to be similarities if we've got creatures with similar characteristics. But why chase cars? Where do you know what I mean? And how does something run looking into his car? It's just it doesn't figure, does it? You know, it's. I mean, one of those on Whitegate Hill. This guy said he was driving from Filey towards Whitegate Hill. He said, and my headlights caught sight of it, you know, as the beam, and it literally set off running, and it was just keeping up with the car, and then just veered off into fields. He says, but it were caked in mud. He said it were just covered in fur and caked in mud. He thought it were all branches and stuff that were running at first. Then he realised it's actually something on two legs running. And that story only come to me probably 12 months since. There's loads and loads of them, Craig, to be honest.
So what's been happening then on the coast? Because obviously your first love, as it were, is stuff that's been going on at Bempton for years and places around there.
Don't tell my wife that, will you? But
no, of course not. No, your second love is Bempton Cliffs. What's been going on there recently?
Do you know, it's been, as we said this other day, as a collective, it's massive. If one-off incidents, that it's kind of subtle, but we over the last, I don't know, 4 months. I mean, Martin Abbas has spent a bit of time on Cliffs with us, a good friend of mine. If anybody looks at live stream, they'll see Martin in. And just get a little plug in for this. Myself and Martin have developed what we call a stratification tool, where if you've got a sighting, cryptid related, UFO related, ghostly, go onto the truthproof.uk website, download this questionnaire, fill the check boxes. We spent a lot of time in it. Martin's a doctor, qualified doctor, working now, and everything that's sent to us will go to a secure website. So we've been working on stratification tool. So I just wanted to get a plug in for that. But Martin came up to spend some time with us. So we're up there, not quite dark. There's about 6 of us, and Martin went, "Hey guys, listen," and where everybody's sort of focusing, and yet there's a noise, and it's right at the back of Martin, and we're on 300-foot cliffs on the edge. There's a fence there. Suddenly, it's under my feet, and I'm not imagining it. Everybody heard it. Peter who stood at the side of me, it's under his feet, and I'll go into what it sounded like in a moment. Then it's 12 foot away, other side of this decking near Jeremy. Then it's down cliffs, and we can hear it. Then it's in field, and Linny summed it up best. And I think it's a sport where they push those huge granite ice blocks, the circular ones, curling. And when they hit each other, they make that sound like a real solid sort of. It was like that, but and it were really strange. We got that sound. So on the level of paranormality, not really earth shattering, is it? But that happened. Then there's a really foggy night up there. I'm not going to go into dates and things because that'll just give you a collective of what was been happening. Really foggy night. Two sisters had come up to spend a bit of time on Cliffs as well, Heidi and Jenny, and there were Linny. Linny's wife wanted to come up that night as well, and a few other people, about 8 or 9 people, thick with fog, so foggy. There was a full moon. So it weren't this month, it was last month, and we didn't even know there were a moon. We weren't penetrating it, and we're all seeing flashes of light in the fog around us, and it's not like one's saying, oh, I just saw another one, and the rest of the group going, oh, did you? We were all animated. Whoa, do you see it again? Do you see it? Not from above, not just all around us. Real strange, long flashes of light, all sorts. So you build the picture. Then a few weeks ago, Ian, we've all got thermal cameras, or most of us have now, and we've got them little psionics cameras as well. So in the distance, about half a mile away, is where we park the cars, which there's nothing there, no street lights or anything, but we saw lights coming to where cars were parked. So Ian stuck the psionics camera on, and obviously it just picks up any light, Craig, anything. And when he's looking at it back on his footage, he ain't got a good computer, so he usually brings it to me. He says, but he says there's a little flash, a little glitch in film. He says there's a flash. So we get it onto my computer, and then I put it into DaVinci Resolve, and we broke it down frame by frame. And there's a flash of light, which, once again, it's on Truth Proof channel. There's a flash of light that just lights the land up. It just fills everything with light. None of us saw it. No. Everything's lit. Everything just lights the daylight. It's daylight. But none of us saw it. And I don't know how many people were there, but at least 6 or 8. And nobody saw a thing. So we wonder how many times that's happening and we're not seeing it. Okay, so then another guy who does a lot of wild camping, Mark, he actually works on a caravan site as groundsman, but he comes up on a night. He's come up for years. He used to come up walking his dog and just bump into us and have a natter. He only lives in Bempton. But now when he comes up, he's always up there. He'll come about 9 o'clock, 2:30 to meet us. And he's got a powerful torch, and we're looking at the contours of the land about 200 yards away, and he's just running his torch along top and probably got it, a little bit touching land and in the sky. And his torch beam on a clear night touched something that lit up, and it looked like a little moon. Only me and him saw it. He goes, whoa, and I start swearing and going, whoa, what the flipping heck was that? Or words like that. So it lit up just for the blink of an eye. But it weren't like, oh, did I see that? It was there. So a few days later, on the Friday, Jeremy, and Jeremy lives, tell you, activity at Bempton's got to be good because he lives near Fylingdales.
Right.
And he'll travel down 2 or 3 times a week because he's seen these lights over at sea. Originally, he came to see what all fuss were about and saw them, which were interesting because a lot of people are getting hits off this phenomena sometimes the first time that they come, and then they don't say out again. It's almost like I'll show you what I can do. Yeah, I don't know. So Jeremy came before us. He ended up down on the cliff tops. We saw his car in the car park. I stuck a thermal on. I could see him about a mile down, or 3/4 of a mile down, just a little outline. I said, there's nobody else there. There's no street lights. There's no properties. I said, he's down there. When he came back, I says, well, how long did you get here? He says, I've had an experience. I says, what? He says, yeah. He says, I've just been walking back, and just for a split second, and it's almost like you've got a 6-foot round or a 5-foot round cardboard cutout of a circle, white. He said it just lit up on field. Mm-hmm. And he says, and just for the blink of an eye, he says, I put my camera bags down. He says, I walked over to where it is. He says, and I just stood there thinking, not talking, saying, oh, show yourself, but just thinking it. So nothing happened. Nothing else happened. So as a collective, there's all these things, GPS anomalies on 2 separate phones. So we've got the phone, and on cars, your cars. As soon as you put the key in the ignition, oh, come on, what they call it, the camera, the dash cam starts. Yeah, the dash cam starts. But on this night, it didn't start till we got to Newsham Hill for some reason, and there's clicking when it starts. So you could say it's faulty. But on this night, GPS on the phone showed us as a collective, or Ian as a one-manner, because we were all together travelling 5 miles over land and then back in a straight line before we went home, and he never did. Jeremy's tracker on his phone, different type as well, showed him as Jesus walking out to sea. Do you know? And so, do you know what I mean? So,
well, that sounds like it could be electromagnetic.
Yeah, yeah. Without a doubt, there's really, really strange things happening at the. We're really enjoying going up at the moment because of the strangeness.
Yeah.
And then on the 18th, which what date are we today? 30th. So it's not long since, is it? On the 9 days ago, on the 18th. Sorry, I realise you're recording this, aren't you?
29th.
Is it 29th? Well, we'll do it right. You can cut this, can't you?
Oh, it's fine. Don't worry.
Yeah. And then on the 18th, which was a Friday, once again, Ian has been really lucky. He just bought a thermal camera, brand spanker, never used it until that day. He'd got it out and just looked at his dog's ink garden and a few other bits and gone through settings. Yeah. And we're up there, and I think there's me, Pete, Ian, and there's two military guys who've come from outer area, but they've come to just have a look at what we're talking about. Ex-military, should I say. Right. So there's a guy who comes up to meet us called Alex, and he wears an headlamp as he walks up the cliff tops. And when he turns it off, it has like a dull green glow in the middle. And it's different to ours or our torches. So we're all looking and we say, oh, Alex is coming. We could see this dull green glow. No light on, just this dull green glow. So myself and Jeremy walked down to meet him. While we were walking down to meet him, that's left Ian stood with the two military guys, and he's just got his thermal camera and he's scanning hillside, and he picks up what I think is probably one of the best pieces of footage I've ever seen in my life. And I don't say that lightly. It really is. I don't know if you got a chance to see it yet when we played it on Sunday's live stream. And basically what he's got on this hillside is a sphere of light, probably, judging by where Jeremy walked and getting a comparison, about 5 or 6 foot in circumference, and it's just constantly turning. And it's on thermal camera, it's there, and he goes through color settings. He doesn't even know because he's only just bought it. When we come back, he says, I think I filmed something interesting. Incidentally, when we walked down to see Alex with the green light, there was nothing there. Nobody there, yet we all saw the green light, which is interesting. But then he's filmed this. It can't be more than 20, 30 foot in air because it's below the hill, but you can see it's in the air and turning. He's filming at 25 frames per second. And what I've done, I've put about 11 seconds of the actual footage up, and then I've put about 50 frames up. And in every frame, it changes. Every single frame, you see 2 lights, you see 3 lights. And then when he changes the color setting to black hot, so you've got this white background with this black intense, the object's square. Right. It's really in some of the frames it's square. Then when he changes it to what's called fusion, which looks a bit like I don't know, it's just a pinky color. There's loads of color palettes on them, and I think they've all got different names. I have a pulsar camera, and I've got aqua, marine, and all sorts of silly things. But mainly I use that white hot or red hot. But he changes it to fusion, and the object in fusion looks brilliant white. Yet over the course of about 10 frames, it turns blood red. It's fascinating. So he's got this great bit of footage, which is there for if you will go to truthproof.uk. The website, go on, you'll find the footage and have a look and judge for yourself.
What do you think they are, Paul? Do you think they could be something like portals?
It's difficult to say, isn't it? I mean, I'm not averse to saying that what Ian's filmed couldn't be some military tech that's been tested. But I don't know. But is there something like portals? I know we're only playing with words. It's just a word for some exit and entry to some other kind of world or other existence. Yeah, could be. We were filming. I spoke to Chris Turner tonight, funnily enough, and I'd just told him I'd just been looking at this footage, filming over at sea. We'd seen what I call the light forms, the ILFs, and whilst filming them, there's a flash of light, and it's like 3 little triangles. But what's interesting, when you actually put it into a good program like Resolve or something like that, there's actually, I don't mean an odd pixel, or people, you get people saying, look at this picture, I've caught a dogman or a Bigfoot in this picture, and you look and you can see something in about as big as a leaf that looks like a dogman. Do you know what I mean? And it's nothing like that. It's a square. There's a darker square in the sky where this thing's gone. And it's almost like a window. And I thought, you've just said portal, and it's a cube shaped. thing, whatever it is, this dark cube. It looks like you're going through into something else. I don't know. 2018, Lisa and her husband were at Speeton because I'm spending a lot of time at Bempton filming and doing a lot of work there. But a mile up the coast, you've got the other village of Speeton. If I were to be asked which place I would want to study for paranormality and strange things of a high strangeness, I'd say Speeton. But it's a very, very hard to get to. You've got to go on the cliffs there, a 400-foot sheer drop, unless you walk a lot further, and then you've got a 400-foot very steep incline. And whereas at Bempton, you can just park up and you can walk down to cliffs, so that's more accessible. But anyway, let's get back to Lisa's story. Summer's day. Her and her husband are parked at, so we've got Speeton. The next holiday resort down is Reeton. So let's not get them mixed up. It's just a little caravan site. There's nothing at Speeton. You've just got the village on the top, very small village, tiny, and then just farmland and sheer cliffs. And they've walked from Reeton and they're walking towards the cliffs of Speeton. It looks magnificent. It looks like something from Lord of the Rings. It's really impressive, these cliffs. And it's a lovely sunny day. Very few people on the beach because it's just inaccessible. She said, but there's a family and a little boy, and he's kicking a football and messing about, and a few other people. And we're literally talking 4 or 5 people on the beach. Says, and as we're walking back, in the middle of the beach, because it's low tide, there's an oval shape about 3 foot off the ground, say 18-inch wide, 2 foot deep, and it's just shimmering. Looks like a mirror. And we're watching it, and they can walk round it. They're looking. It says at one time, the little boy nearly ran into it. He didn't seem aware of it. She says, now I'm looking, and there's no properties, no houses. You're just going up this very steep incline and nothing, farmland. She said, I'm thinking, is there somebody projecting something down here? But it's there. It's independent. Is that a portal? Yeah, that'd be close. I have no idea what a portal looks like, Craig. But if somebody were to say to me, what do you think? Have you got any evidence that these things could exist? I'd say, well, what did she see on the beach that day? And her husband, due to nature of his job, because we've filmed Lisa, myself and Chris Turner for a new documentary Beyond the Veil, because we're doing that as well as the one I'm doing with Les. And I'd say that is the closest thing for me that if somebody's going to describe something and do we think portals exist? Because I said, weren't you tempted to put your hand in it? I think I would have been, honestly. And, they were next to it. They looked round it. Yeah. It don't bear thinking about what's out there. And this tiny beach with no footfall, because in summertime, it hardly gets any footfall. And in the winter, there's nothing. And, there's a young boy back in 1980. Are we okay for time here, Craig?
No problem.
Yeah. There's a young boy, 1980, and his mum and dad gone on holiday to Reeton. In the years prior, his older brother always used to come on holiday with him, and he just got to that age where he wants to either stay at home and probably sit with his girlfriend, watching TV. I should imagine that's what they'd be doing, wouldn't they? Or reading a magazine. But anyway, he wanted to stay at home with his girlfriend or maybe go out with his friends. I don't know, but he'd grown out to going on holiday with his mum and dad. But prior to that, he always they'd allow him to go up the beach towards the cliffs at Speeton and light a fire on beach, and he'd sit there and he'd think he was sort of grown up. Well, the younger one asked if he could do it this particular year. I think it was 1980. I hope I've got year right. I hate it when I get it wrong, because sometimes people are listening and they'll ring me up and say, or message me and say, you got that year wrong on my story. But I think it was 1980. So he's lit a little fire. He's told his mum and dad he's going to be back before it gets too dark, and there's nothing there. And as he's sort of watching to see, and then suddenly he becomes aware of what looks like the moon. 420-foot cliffs, and he's looking at the silhouette of them. And halfway up the cliff is the moon. It looks like a moon. And he's watching it, puzzled by what it is. And then suddenly he realizes it's moving towards him. And he's frightened to death. Overwhelming fear comes over him. He don't care about fire. It's not hardly going to set fire to the beach. And he sets off running. And I think it's probably about a mile and a half from Speeton to the campsite. And when you leave the sheer cliffs, you go on to it sort of slowly goes from like sheer to 45 to a gradual gradient. But in between it all, there's little inlets where the sea's eroded clay down that area. In fact, there's some black clay there where fossil hunters used to have a massive group called the Friends of Speeton Clay, because they've got tons of interesting fossils from that area, and they call it Black Cliff. She said, right, black, horrible clay. So anyway, he's running and he sees an inlet because he realizes it's gaining on him, this light, and he's not going to get back to Reeton, even though he don't have a clue what it's going to do. It probably just sailed straight past him, but the fears overtook him. So he goes in one of these inlets, tucks himself in, and sits there, and it never comes. And then he plucks up the courage to look, and it's gone. But that's another one from this nondescript place called Speeton. Got a sighting this year from Speeton, from people. There's literally just a little row of houses into the village, and Steve and Paula, real names, saw a huge flaming orange object on the field that rose and became cigar shaped and then went back down. So interesting, a fascinating place.
Why do you think there's so much activity up there, Paul?
I don't know, if I'm being truthful. I really don't know. I mean, if I'll not dwell on the Wolflands type stuff, the dogmen or the werewolf type creatures, but what we've got with that are lots of burial mounds and lots of connotations to the wolf, earth places that are named. Do you know what I mean? Not necessarily named after werewolves, but there's warg, as in Norse. The warg was a wolf, yeah. and wars. You've got Warsman's Head. You don't have to change a letter to make it Wolfman's Head. But there's loads and loads of them, which we included in the film Wolflands. Not trying to say, oh, this is why these things are seen, but there's lots and lots of references to the wolves. But why all this strange activity? I don't know. It's not new. I've not invented the wheel here. This has been going on, I think, since people first started becoming aware that it were going on.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's there.
Yeah, because you mentioned last time I spoke to you that you'd seen sort of newspaper articles going back tens of years, way back before you started getting involved in this.
Absolutely. So let's imagine then that we'll stick with the light forms, the ILFs, the intelligent light forms, these spheres of orange light that seemingly just appear. They don't fly from nowhere. They just appear, and suddenly they become a multiple of anything from 2 to 5 and hang there and then disappear, appear in a different part of the sky. So a lot of people will say, well, that's some new military tech that they're developing, and you're just getting to see it because you're looking over the North Sea in a remote place. Yeah. Well, if it's new military tech, it's not really advanced since the first lifeboat logs and Coastguard logs started documenting going out to calls from the general public, from Coastguard themselves, getting lifeboats out for and MOPs, members of the public, and police officers, all sorts of people over not just 10 or 20 years, over 50 years, going out because people have reported seeing spheres of orange light and red light over the sea, and they think that there's a boat or an aircraft in distress. So you get lifeboats, Craig, from multiple agencies like Bridlington, Flamborough, Hornsey, all going out for 4 and 5 and 7 hour searches, and then they come back. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would think in the grand scheme of things, if we're going to do it out of 100, that this will be like a 5%er.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of them. It's not. I'm not just picking a couple of years. There's over every year we're getting them, and they come back. They've not found nothing, and it says false alarm with good intent on the log. I've looked at loads of these logs. False alarm with good intent. There were a lot of those kind of reports. Not a lot. There was some of those reports packed around just before and after Lightning XS894. What did XS894? I think it was. The Lightning crashed September the 8th, 1970, allegedly pursuing a UFO off Flamborough Head. But I've looked at the lifeboat logs before, and they'd gone out to calls for these strange lights over the sea. They don't call them strange lights, just reports of potentially a boat in distress, but nothing to be found. And you see them there before and after. It's fascinating, and there's so many of these reports, and they're never going to stop. And what a thing to say, because I think if we're going to find, I don't mean proof, if we want documented proof of something, we don't know what, then the Coastguard and lifeboat logs are an invaluable source if they'd let us look at them.
Yeah.
I got to look at them before when they were paper logs. Now everything's digital. I can't get into lifeboat places like I used to do, speak to lads and they'd give me a log and let me, have a look, go through it and have a look at it. I can't do that now, but I used to be able to. And it's an invaluable source of information, because not only could you plot it and look if there's any particular months that are highlighted, you could, when I wrote Truth Proof 1, when the people were going missing, I were even plotting the phases of the moon, and nothing to do with cryptids or anything like that. It just happened that when you look at tide times when people are going missing and things like that, it gives you the moon phase. And amazingly, some of the people were going, well, a large number of the ones I looked into went missing on a waning gibbous moon. What it means, I don't know, but it just revealed that pattern. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But no, the lifeboat logs, the Coastguard logs, they could reveal lots and lots of information. And when you think that this is a professional body that's in no doubt that these things are being seen out at sea, otherwise they wouldn't spend thousands in some instances sending the boats out to search for them. And then when they find nothing, the response is almost futile. False alarm with good intent. Yeah. Nobody looks into what that false alarm could have been, because the truth of it is nobody wants to look into the fact that we might be dealing with some true unexplained phenomena occurring out there. There are loads and loads of the fishermen see these things, and rock anglers and trawlermen. They've been invaluable to me over years, with the information that they've shared. Then you get idiots going up onto cliffs, and there'll be some people listening saying, yeah, you're one of them, Paul. But it might be. But no, we went up the other day, and there's a fisherman who comes up with us, Mick Sigson, and he goes up. He's had 2 experiences in 50 years, literally 2 in 50 years, fishing rock angler, as well as a trawlerman over his lifetime. But he come with a story. He goes, the Filey fishing match must have been on a few days before, and he went up to see if they were catching anything, seeing whether it was viable for him to go up. And this guy said, he says, I were up here earlier. He said, and I saw these lights coming up to me, blokes with headlights on. He says, there's 3 blokes. He says, and I'm fishing. They fish on edge at cliff, these guys. I think I've told you before. They're literally on edge of 300-foot cliffs. It's terrifying. And because there's a fence, and they get over the other side of it.
Right.
And the shouts out at darkness. Have you seen any werewolves? I mean, Jesus Christ, come on, give me a... We know I'm sat here talking about other people's reports of things, but you don't just come out with that to a complete stranger, do you? You know what I mean? It's just, but you get it, that it comes with territory. And I suppose if I'm writing the Truth Proof books and documenting these accounts, you're going to get people coming up looking at these things. I just hope they're sensible and I don't mean don't stray off the path as in some kind of film, but they kind of respect the land, respect the farmland and the livestock, but I can't take any responsibility for that, because people have been coming up for years. But there you go.
It's surprising that there haven't been accidents. People falling off the cliffs or.
Well, there has been over years. I mean, fishermen have gone down as well, and some of them go down on ropes in some places. It's absolutely crazy just to catch a cod. I sound like I'm being disrespectful to fishermen there. I'm not. It's because, I stand up there in all these conditions, don't I? Ice, snow, I just like to get up there. And basically, I suppose what I'm doing, or the group of people that we go up with, the fishermen would look upon us and just think, they're crazy. Well, at least we're fishing. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know.
Yeah, it's all from different perspectives, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
So when's Wolflands 2, as its working title is, going to be out, do you reckon?
Oh gosh, we thought we would finish the first one in 12 months, and it took us 3 years. Right. But I think we've filmed 4 or 5 people for this one, and similar thing for the one I'm doing with Chris Turner, which is just all unexplained phenomena. So I don't think we're not going to get it for at least another 6 months. I wouldn't have thought so. And I'm on with another book, and I say that, and people say, "Oh, when's it going to be ready?" But I've no idea. But I'm writing about underwater UFOs, USOs, and I've called it the sub universe, the submerged universe, because basically there is a universe down there that's we know less about than we do the moon.
Absolutely.
So it's fascinating the potential, because we've filmed lights under sea as well. The amount of footage that I've managed to obtain over the last few years, Craig, is just amazing. And we've got lights under sea on 3 occasions, which I've just put little snippets up because I know I want to use them with these projects. But we like to be fair. A few years ago with a thermal camera up at Bempton, well, it was late last year, and out in the ocean there, I can see a vessel that's called the research vessel. It's an unmanned vessel. I don't know what it was doing apart from researching, plotting area. You could see it in daytime, just going up and down, side scan sonar on it, lots of things on it. But at the side of this, with my thermal camera, I can see a long tube under the water, a lot bigger than the vessel, a long heat signature, should we say. So if I wanted to cheat, I'd be saying, I filmed a huge UFO filmed under the water. I didn't say anything because a few days later, probably with less than the week, a 45-foot fin whale beached on the beach at Bridlington. I believe that's what we'd seen, or that's what I'd filmed. Do you know what I mean? And I'm absolutely certain. So we've got to be true to it. I don't mind if somebody explains what we're looking into. If this incredible footage that Ian managed to get on the 18th, if somebody has a friendly word in my ear and says, "Look," he said, "this is some military tech that they're testing," then and gives you a good enough example, I'm happy to go with that. It doesn't have to be otherworldly, does it? It's still fascinating, but I think what we were looking at with that sphere, or what we're in the footage, is the same as what I saw with Mark when his torch beam hit it. It's in the same area as well. It's the same as what Jeremy saw. And interestingly, you know Bob Brown, don't you, Craig? Bob was up there a few years ago, and he was up there with us. And he's taking a picture in daylight of a kestrel, just very close to where this footage has been obtained. And then he's looking at his camera, and I says, "What's the matter?" He says, "Something's just appeared on Hill." And he's got this picture. If you ever get Bob on, ask him to show the picture, and it just looks like the head and shoulders of something really big. He said it just appeared in one frame, where in one shot, and it had gone. He was taking a picture at Kestrel and saw it and took the picture. So he's got that. It's the same area where Bob and one of my daughters, should say our daughters, shouldn't say mine, should I? Oh, she'll kill me. Our daughters. I'm sort of setting camera up to film out over the sea, and there's Gemma and Bob looking at this hill in the night, and she's got this torch, powerful torch, my torch, and she's just going like that, and she says, "What's that white square there, Bob?" And he looked, he says, "Oh," she says, "I think it's a board on a fence post." Then obviously he knows area. He says, "No, it ain't," and he put his torch on it, and they both say it dropped to the floor and just vanished. Loads. And is that a portal, or is it just a board that's fell over on in field? Do you know what I mean? But location is key, Craig, without a doubt. It seems to me that there's areas within the zones of strangeness that are more concentrated than others. And this little pocket that we've got that we're looking at there, you know, I dare say that there's other places in UK, other places in the world just as active. But what you've got at the moment is a concentrated group of people who are investing a lot of time in that area, in ourselves, like, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do remember driving over the moors myself a few years back, and actually driving past Farlingdales, and I remember thinking to myself, that looks like something out of a sci-fi film. I mean, it's just a very strange place, isn't it, up there, and all you know, all that area. So, well, it's been fascinating talking to you, Paul. Just again, your website.
Yeah.
Truthproof.co.uk.
No, it's just truthproof.uk.
Right.
And anybody who's interested in Truthproof books as paperbacks, you can order them through there, or you can get them off eBay. And if you want there's 4 Truthproof books, and there's the Night People as well. And you can also get a hard copy, a DVD, which we didn't think people would be interested in DVDs, of Wolflands.
Right.
So a physical copy of Wolflands can be obtained through truthproof.uk or come on, Paul, eBay.
Right.
And if you want the Kindle books, they're on Amazon and as downloads. So yeah, that's about where we're at, and been a great talking to you. I'd love to come back.
Well, good luck. Good luck with all your future projects. Good luck with the book. I know how difficult it is to get them finished from my own personal experience. Good luck with the filming. It sounds like you've got a load on. And yeah, it'll be great to speak to you again sometime in the near future when these are finished.
Excellent. Look forward to it. Take care.
Thank you. Cheers, Paul.
Bye.